Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Kevin,
This is Luis.
and together we're the Quakesaholics, where we dive deep into the world of the black and blue. In today's video, we're unpacking quite an eventful week and a half for the San Jose Earthquakes. We're going to be kicking things off with our thoughts on the recent showdowns against Colorado, Portland, Orlando, and Sacramento. And after that, we're going to go into a deeper conversation about our thoughts on the US Open Cup meltdown.
Yeah, so I think it'd be best to have the show start off right, and then we'll get into the more uh the stuff we'd rather not think about later on the show. But yeah, start the video by talking about Colorado. It felt really good to get that result. The Quakes looked good going into that game as well, right off the back of the LAFC victory. Initially it felt kind of like other away games that we've felt previously this season, where we go down 2 goals in the first half, I believe. And honestly, you could even say that we were lucky to have it just be 2 goals. It wasn't looking very good initially for that first half, but thankfully, Pellegrino got that goal right near the end of the second half, which I think
End of the
is
first
really
half.
important. In end of the first half, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was it's good. I think that it does change things a lot if we go into the half at 2-0, but to go in at 2-1, obviously you're only 1 goal away, and I think that totally changes the dynamic of that second half. And Pellegrino got the goal, or not, a goal from Hernan, a goal from Espinosa, but two of the goals assisted by Victor Costa, who I remember personally I wasn't too happy with against LAFC, so I think that it was good to see him have a strong performance in that Colorado Rapids game.
Yeah, I strongly agree with everything you're saying. That was actually in my notes as well. That I definitely want to give Costa the props he deserved in that LAFC game. Not that he played bad. We talked about this last time. We felt that everyone played very well against LAFC, but there were definitely moments where there were duels being lost, creating turnovers for LA. So to see him bounce back in this game, get 2 assists, and really putting in a solid defensive shift as well. Props to him. Definitely deserved the man of the match honors. I think was it Costa or Espinosa? I think it was one of those like kind of shared things where maybe one got it
Yeah,
officially, and then all the fans kind of gave the credit to the other person as well.
they sent Victor Costa to do the interview, so I feel like that is implicitly implies that he was the man of the match. And yeah, like
Yeah,
to kind of to go off of what you were saying, I think that me and you and most Quakes fans in general haven't had too much doubt about Victor Costa on the defensive side of the game, but I think that that's why it's important for him to play the way he did in Rapids and show that he can have moments where he picks out a good pass, especially the ball to Christian Espinosa. I mean, such a good ball, like diagonal. It's in a cute angle, but he finds him and then sets him up for a good finish.
even when you look at how the team performed as a whole, I think being down 2 goals and then being able to come back and actually get that result, I think that's a huge morale boost because we saw them really rally against LA in the away game, coming back from 3-1 and almost winning that game, almost tying that game. I think if we had like 10, 15 more minutes, we probably could have gone home with some points. But this time, to have that same 2 goal deficit, excuse me, in LA it was a 3 goal deficit. Here was a 2 goal deficit. But to be able to come back from that and get the points and get all 3 points, those 3 points are gonna be massive.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that the Quakes defended just enough better than the Galaxy game, and I think started the goals and the comeback just a bit earlier enough to turn it around and actually get those 3 points as opposed to just leaving empty-handed.
Yeah, so
And
I think
then
overall our thoughts are we're very, very happy with the result. But in terms of what we're gonna be talking about today is basically the only really big positive to take away.
yeah, so now that we got the good news out of the way, let's get into the more unfortunate results since the Rapids game.
Yeah, so transitioning over the Portland game, this one I was actually able to attend. The Colorado game, I was very, very sick, so I had to cancel those plans. But yeah, Portland seems like we always play against them on a Wednesday. It makes traveling harder, but we're still there. Going into this game, my thoughts were if there was ever a time to beat them, it's now. And it was because Portland had just come off against Seattle in a loss at home. They were last in the table, I believe, going into this match day. So we felt good about it. And the end of that first half, it felt amazing. We, at least in my memory, I don't remember ever being up two at the half in Portland. Providence Park is a very difficult stadium to play in. The fans really get behind the team. Also, with the field being turf, I don't know if that plays to their advantage. I mean, I don't know how much that plays an effect, but the point is, we'd never been in that position at that time, and it just felt really great at the half.
Definitely. I thought, it was kind of strange because I knew what Portland's position was going into the game, but I mean, as a Quakes fan, we haven't had too many good moments like that against Portland, especially in Portland. Felt like Portland really didn't really wake up until the second half. I never really felt, in danger. I think that even the commentator said while I was watching the game that for the first 50 minutes, probably the Earthquakes were closer to a third than Portland were to coming back, really. They were not in this game at all.
It was definitely the San Jose Earthquakes show in the first 50 minutes of the game. But I will say though that I mean we'll get into the red card pretty shortly, but being at the game before the red card, you could definitely feel that the Timbers were on the way up. Those first, what was it, 15, 20 minutes of the second half, you can look at this momentum graph, is very skewed in their favor, which is interesting because this first half also shows it as a lot of green, but it didn't feel like they were ever dangerous in the first half, but in the second half, it definitely did feel like they were dangerous.
I do think that the red card was what changed that game entirely. It was a completely
Yeah,
different game before that red card and a completely different game after that red card. And I mean, I think every Quakes fan knows at this point. I mean, even the league knows at this point that that just shouldn't be a red for a variety of reasons. I mean, it's questionable if that's even a penalty at all. The arm was by his side, and from the angles that I saw, his arm was between his hip and his ball. So if you were to remove his arm, it would have hit his hip anyway. So it's not like it makes him bigger. I think that's like a pretty big factor with other possible penalties that I've seen previously is whether it makes your, they talk about the silhouette. But, even if it is a handball, to call a penalty and a red suggests that it's like a Suarez against Ghana. Like he just smacked it out and just like it's volleyball or something. Like it just like you
yeah,
have to be so like obvious, like Yarborough type slapping it out of the box to be given a penalty and a red. It's just ridiculous.
yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that. Right now, I agree with everything you've said because I've watched the replay, I've watched the highlights. But
Yeah.
being in the stadium, I actually felt a lot differently than that. You could see this angle of the picture. I was on the other side in the corner view. In the moment of the foul, we couldn't really tell what was going on because there were so many bodies and there was so much happening in the box and just trying to get, the shot stopped and getting out of the area. And when you're at the stadium, you're overwhelmed with those emotions of just, please don't concede, please don't concede. And so I saw the ref take out the red, and I had no idea who the red was for. I actually initially thought that it was for Yarbrough. I thought maybe he, I don't know, hit someone or found someone or
Collision.
something. It did not cross my mind at all that Bruno Wilson had gotten a red card.
He was up like celebrating like he
Yeah,
should have been for such a good online clearance and get to be rewarded with a pen and a sending off is absurd.
yeah, yeah. In that moment, I was just thinking, well, okay, we got a red. I'll see what happened in the highlights. But I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ref didn't go to VAR, which is why I
No.
thought, oh, okay, like the ref was so certain that they're not going to check the replay. And so I gave them the benefit out
Right.
of, okay, you know what? We took a red. It is what it is. And that was it.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I didn't go around asking everyone else. I was in the away section, but at least from the body language, there was disappointment over the red. But I don't think we really realized and appreciated how bad of a call that was.
I actually heard Lucci in the Apple stream. You could hear him say to the fourth official on the sideline, penalty or a red, you know,
Hmm.
because it's questionable at best that is a penalty, but like I said, to have it a penalty and a red is just so out of proportion to
Yeah,
what even if it was a yellow card or sorry, a handball and a clear goal scoring chance, like it's still crazy. The players, I think they weren't protesting too much, and yeah, to not check the VAR on that, or I don't know if VAR mentioned it and told him to look at the monitor and he just didn't want to or what, but something went wrong there from the officiating.
yeah. The other thing I was going to say of being at the stadium, we can see it, it's 2-1. I'm pretty sure the subs had already been lining up before the penalty was given, but then we still stuck with the subs of bringing in Beeson and Judd for Hernan and Ebobisse. And I was actually surprised. And I was interested because, when we got the red card against Houston, we basically instantly took off Nico and played defensively for the rest of the game, right? And
Mhm.
I don't know if this was Lucci reflecting on, hey, no, we shouldn't try to, bunker up, or maybe the pressure from the fans, which I doubt, to be honest. But I don't know. Whatever the case was, it was very different than the strategy against Houston, and we're still playing on the road. And I was just surprised that we were bringing on Judd. And I actually sort of disagreed with that decision. I, after the Houston game, I don't think we recorded after the Houston game, but I remember we talked after the Houston game, and I actually thought we did a really good defensive performance. We defended for
Yeah.
like 15 minutes, and I mean, we got the red here at what, the 74th or something like that. There was only 15 minutes or so to kill for the game. Based on what I had seen in Houston, I was thinking, okay, I still think we can see the rest of this game out. Obviously, it's a different environment, it's a different field. It's not apples to apples, but we have the skill to do it. But then it was just a very different strategy that I disagreed with, and I think the 2-2 was kind of our own doing. And again, I didn't have the context of like the bad referee call. And I, in that moment, thought, wow, this is a really mismanaged game to be 2-2 when we should have probably just played more defensively. But then the moment where I realized, oh, wait, actually, there's something fishy going on with the officiating was the 3-2. Again, I was far because Yarbrough was on the other side, but like I saw like a hip to hip collision, and I was thinking, okay, there is no way this is a penalty based on how much we seem to protect goalies in the box. Whenever we see a corner, a goalie gets touched, the play just stops. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And so when
mhm.
that penalty came up, I was very, very surprised. And then I think I lost my mind when the 4-2 happened. There's a questionable potential handball from Portland, which then leads to the
Oh,
counterattack
that's
and then
right. Yeah,
becomes the 4-2. And then they didn't check that on the VR. And so actually
yeah.
those two incidents were what made me think, wow, we are so unlucky with the refs tonight. And then obviously after the game, I mean, I'll get into this after I talked to Lucci. I saw all the comments, I saw the highlights, and I was like, wow, this was a really disastrous performance from the referee.
You
Which I
wanna
don't know,
tell the listeners
maybe.
you don't gotta say verbatim, but do you wanna tell the listeners what Lucci said? Give 'em an
um,
idea. In person, right?
yes. Okay. So like, for anyone that hasn't been, after the game, behind this Providence Park sign, this is where the team bus is on the street, and so there's this pathway that the players actually have to walk out, and so you can actually catch the players and the coaching staff while they're leaving the stadium and getting into the buses. And so, as a side note, that's why I love going to Portland, and even if it's on a Wednesday, it's totally worth it because you just get that raw emotion, and boy, oh boy, was it worth it this time. I won't say it verbatim, but if you've watched the press conference and you thought Lucci was, how do we put this? If you thought he was showing emotions during the press conference, it was at least 10 times more intense in
Yeah.
person leaving the stadium. And I think that it was also a big part of the reason why I went back and like watched everything. I was like, wow, like I really understand what Lucci was saying. he was so frustrated. He was so mad, and rightly so.
Yeah. And I mean, even like I said previously, to for MLS to admit fault is, I mean, when does that happen, right? So
Yeah,
the mistake has to be pretty bad for them to do that.
yeah. And so, actually, what did you think of the second penalty kick watching it on TV?
Yeah, I remember I was at the time I was annoyed. The red card after that moment, just seeing enough of these kind of scenarios, I suppose, I kind of felt like the loss is inevitable.
Hmm.
It's 2-1. They had enough time. They're in Portland. They're gonna wake up, and especially after 2-2, I was like, okay, it's only going in one direction. The second penalty, honestly, I did think it was probably a penalty. I believe it's just one of those where Yarbrough comes for the ball. I forget who their player was, maybe Rodriguez. Contested the ball. It's a 50-50, and they both fully committed to getting the ball, and it was just a matter of whoever wins it is going to be the one receiving the foul. And that just
Hmm.
happened to be Rodriguez. You know, Yarbrough, he gets like the tip of his finger on it, but the other guy from the replays that I saw, he puts his foot, he gets a touch on it, the ball moves past, and he falls, and he falls because of the contact that Yarborough made. And so honestly, I see why the ref called it. But again, I think that like those circumstances and those chances are just a result of the game and the momentum just completely swinging 180 in favor of Portland. It's really that red card and penalty that is just what was the defining moment. And everything afterward was just a butterfly effect cascading of that initial red card. That was Portland. And then not too much better in the results in Orlando. We both got to go to that game.
You were
My
almost not going to
initial
go.
I know,
Uh,
but like my finals, debating should I not? But my finals were over and I was bored and I was like playing FIFA and I was like, what am I doing here? And then I literally just like in an hour notice, I text you. I was like, should I go? And then you called me and then like you can hear the engine in the background. So yeah,
yeah.
too much.
No,
Once the thought was in my mind, it was just only a matter of time before I like got my stuff and I went. So yeah, thankfully I was
yeah.
able to make that Orlando game. Yeah, it wasn't a game that a neutral probably wouldn't find very entertaining. There weren't too many chances. Orlando historically and still is a very good defensive side. They're not a team that concede too many chances. They came into this game after also going 0-0 against Inter Miami, right? Who probably has the
Hmm.
most firepower in the league. I was convinced that it was just going to be a 0-0, and I would be even disappointed with that result because, just where we are in the standings. But then there's that counterattack at the end. And personally, I think Skahan probably should have taken a yellow card when he sees that they're making the run on the left wing, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
The cross comes in, falls to the right winger. He fluffs the shot and it just falls perfectly to the striker, who I had been saying was doing nothing the entire game and was mocking and like he shut me up so bad. I don't think I said a word until the final whistle blew after that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we didn't talk at all until the final whistle, and then we both agreed instantly that we would have loved to see Scan take that yellow. But then thinking about it later, I was wondering if they're playing a little reserved because of the refereeing stuff that went on in Portland, and they're scared to take the reds.
Yeah, I don't think it's that, but I honestly think it's like, like a Grissel or a Judson or maybe a Yule or even like an Espinosa, that someone with a bit more experience would take that yellow. But I think,
Hmm.
Skahan's a fast player. Maybe he just backed himself to meet him. But
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we've been getting goonied so many times. It feels like we never are
right?
the Goonies anymore. But
Yeah.
reflecting on the game, though, I don't think it's one that we deserve to win. And even if we had tied, I mean, obviously, I would love to take the point. I always want points, but it's one of those things where we needed the win, and at most, we deserved the tie. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
between
I agree.
everyone that played, we had three shots. on target, I'm pretty sure. And those came from Greso, Rodriguez, and Scan. So it's one of those games where
Espinosa, there was also that one counterattack where Preston gave the ball to Espinosa and he just, hit it wide of the post.
yeah,
I think that was the
yeah.
most clear cut chance because it was on a breakaway, but
Hmm.
it
Yeah,
just wasn't like the night for us. Just didn't go our
yeah,
way. It's
yeah.
unfortunate.
And again, I was talking about shots on target.
Right.
We
Yeah,
definitely had
you're right.
more than 3 shots. So yeah, you can see in this chart that this ball, both of them really went just wide. I mean, I'll be the last person to fault Espinosa on anything because he's done so much for us already.
Saint of
Yeah,
simple
yeah,
stuff.
untouchable. Yeah,
Can do no
um,
wrong.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough to lose at home. And this is something we also touched on last time that seeing who starts in this game kind of
Mhm.
determines who isn't going to be starting in the next game.
Yeah, it turned out the answer was everybody, apparently.
Yeah, yeah, not even the goalie. Yeah, I mean, we can. I think that's a good transition into the Sacramento game, and we can start at the lineup. And there were no repeats from the starters against Orlando.
I would go as far as to say that not a single player that started that Sacramento game would start if it was an MLS team or an MLS opposition, an MLS game. If everyone is fully fit, of course.
Do I agree with that?
I think the only
I think
argument is like maybe
Judd.
Judd and Nico,
Yeah.
but that's like a form thing. And like even then, yeah, I think Lucci's preference is Bobasi over and Gresso or Yule.
Okay, so I'll agree on the Nico that I think he would definitely take Yule or Hernan. Or I guess Hernan is over Scan. You could say Yule is over Nico, Grosso over Morales, or some combination of that. Like I definitely think this is the runner up midfield. I don't
Yes,
know.
it's the runner-up for sure. Judd is the closest. I personally think, like, if you ask Lucci who is the starter, I think, like, it's still a Bobasi's position, I guess. He's hanging on to it not very well, but either way, it's not an
I,
MLS lineup.
I get the premise that you're getting at, but
Yeah,
yeah, Judd is the only wild card there, is what I'm saying. Yeah, I think we both had the same feelings when we saw this lineup. I was very disappointed, not because of the players. I'm not saying that like these players are bad.
they were disappointing.
I think the disappointment stems from we saw the Oakland lineup, and that felt a lot more representative of our MLS lineups. And so it represented a certain seriousness towards this competition. And then when we saw this and seeing certain names missing, on top of the fact
I
that we struggled against Oakland until Yule came on,
Yeah.
it was disappointing.
And I think also for me, when I saw the lineup of the LAFC game in the Open Cup as well, I think that's when I really felt like, I mean, come on, like LAFC has like all that budget and they're still playing their, like you'd think they'd have depth and they still elected to put on their starters. I mean, Buwanga played, Ilie played,
Yeah,
uh,
Bogusz,
Oliver played,
Tillman,
Bogusz.
everyone.
Yeah, like the midfield to the front line, that's who they played at Levi's. And
Yeah,
for us to go with nothing like that for, who that would be for us is just disappointing. And especially, after Lucci says like he's gonna take this seriously. And I understand that you play youth, and this is a tournament where it's expected that youth is going to be played. But I also think that it doesn't really help those youth players if they don't have any veterans to kind of like carry them through those games. Because it's going to be a difficult game. It's Sacramento, who's unbeaten, and they have history in this tournament. And we can't just expect to run them over or just because we're the MLS team. And this is something that I said in the last episode too, but yeah, we are the MLS team. Yeah, we're the favorite, but that's only true if we play an MLS lineup.
and to
Yeah,
give credit, I do think Benji and Jude played phenomenal games. We've been saying that we've been disappointed with the lineup, but I don't think it's on the side of the attack. And I think even after the Oakland game, we were saying like, hey, if we leave the midfield and the attack the same, but then reinforce the defense. It's funny because we were talking about this and we are kind of like, I kind of wish we hadn't appealed the red card for Wilson because then he would have had to be rested
yeah.
against Orlando, and then he would have been fit or ready for this game. And I think that would have given a lot more confidence. Like even not that Verhoeven played bad. I think he played well, but I think Verhoeven or Muni would have a lot more confidence being next to Wilson and
That's
even
what I
Jackson.
mean.
It's a
Yeah,
veteran,
that's what I
yeah,
mean.
like
Like
you're saying.
you need those experienced player to kind of carry you through that. And that's not like a diss on those youth players. It's just this is, like this is another level from MLS Next Pro or like the odd last 10, 15 minutes. This is a knockout game. And you need those players that put you in those good positions, that feed you the right balls, that just are gonna make your game look better.
And give you
They didn't
instructions in the game too.
the only real seniority that we had was Alfredo Morales, but I thought that he was very pedestrian. I don't think that Nico and Morales are bad players or bad midfielders, but they complement other players,
Yeah.
their system players, I think. And you can't, it's one of those where I think that you have one or the other. Their play style is very similar. They pass backward and they pass sideways a lot. And, I don't think that passing backward and passing sideways is always bad. But, Sacramento, they looked up for it. They were going hard into their physical team, and Nico and Morales were just kind of passing it around. They'd receive the ball, pass it back to Beeson, and then we'd be launching a lot of long balls. What I thought about reflecting on the game was that we played like we would against maybe an MLS team, very chaotic, I would say, and again, resorting to a lot of long balls. I feel like we should have the quality to be able to kind of have a bit more intricate play loading up as opposed to just passing it back to Beeson, passing it out wide to Marie and having him just lob it over for Buddha or lobbing it over for Preston Judd or Benji. Yeah, and those midfielders didn't really take control of the midfielder or of the game, and they were just passive. And another thing too
Yeah.
that I noticed during that game was how Marie and Verhoeven, and I'm almost positive that these were instructions given to them by Lucci. Every time a Sacramento Republic fullback got the ball, they pressed them. And
Hmm.
however, Sacramento, I'm pretty sure for a lot of the game, it felt like they had five in the back, and then their wingers
Yeah.
were up pretty high. I remember Gurr on our near side, he was making runs on that right side. And because Sacramento was kind of sat back, Marie and Verhoeven were having to move up really high to engage Sacramento's fullbacks. And there were a few times where they would do that and the press just wasn't really working. And then it would leave a lot of space in behind for Sacramento to where Sacramento would just be able to kind of, I don't know, maybe check back and then do a long ball over the top, and then Gurr can make a run down the flank or whoever would have been on the left side. And that's actually
Hmm.
how both of Sacramento's goals were in that first half. I think it was the first goal that where Verhoeven checks in super high up. And again, I'm not necessarily saying Verhoeven made a mistake. I am pretty just because of how regular it was, how consistent it was, how automatic it felt. I'm convinced that it was instructions given by Lucci, and I've seen him do that before, where Capo or whoever the left back is, Victor Costa, where they press up really high. But like
Hmm.
the first goal by Sacramento is a long ball into Felipe Luis, and Muni has to go where you'd expect the right back to be. And then in the middle of the box, there's two players who you'd expect the center backs would be, but they're being marked by Beeson and Marie. So Marie's having to, shift over, and then that leads in a goal. And then the other goal, which I think is, I remember looking back at it, and I remember thinking Marie got burnt seeing it in person, but it looked even worse, honestly, when I looked back at it. And again, I like Marie. I think he's quality on the ball. He let Gurr, who had been already playing a pretty good game up until that point, hit his blind side near the half and then just sprint down and then just putting that cross for kind of an Espinoza type goal. It's just, I don't know. I thought that was bordering on unexcusable. I just wish that Lucci put in a lineup, started off with a lineup that would be able to take control of that game, take control of the midfield, and not have to be so chaotic. And maybe they wouldn't have to basically, instead of trying to rely on press and intensity, which I understand is Lucci's philosophy, I wish they put in the personnel to be able to rely more on their technical ability and their quality, where there is more of an advantage compared to a USL team. Because, Sacramento USL, they're going to be physical, they're going to be strong, which is why I think Earthquakes should have gone into that game trying to make Sacramento run for the ball. Put Ewell in there,
Yeah.
start Ewell. And that's the thing, like you just put Ewell in there, and that would make Nico or Morales' game so much better. And
Yeah.
then, then you'd have Ewell kind of moving up or playing as the 8, and then you can have Nico and Morales being the 6. What I just said about you also would apply to Bruno Wilson. There was just so much control on the ball. There was a few times where I remember Sacramento would be pressing Wilson, and he just calmly just passed it out to Marie or passed it into Yule. Just so much more
Yeah.
control of the ball, and I feel like that's what they should have had going into the game to not make it so chaotic.
And confidence is contagious in these kinds of games too.
Exactly, and yeah, exactly, and, like, that's why it's important to have, like, veteran players and, have the quality shine through, and
I think we definitely saw that veteran effect when Espinosa and Hernan came on. We really saw like, okay, this is why being an MLS team, we are the favorites. The quality of the
yeah,
player is just better.
exactly.
But the problem is that we're putting them into a situation where we're already trailing, and so then they have to make up for that, and they have to try harder, and so it kind of destroys the whole premise of rotation.
I also felt like what was it, Skahan and Benji playing fullback at the end of the game or at the end of the
Yeah.
90? Like, again, I don't think Lucci should lose his job. I believe in Lucci. I think he's a good coach. But sometimes I feel like his subs, it's like throw on as much firepower as you can, and that's a system, and it's very American in a way. You could say like just trying to just, put in the guys who run fast and like let's just go and score goals. But against a USL team, when we're the ones with the $6 million player, you would expect our strength comparatively to be in having control and technique. And that's where I feel like just putting on as many forwards, like yeah, you have guys who can score goals and you might like in transition, you have speed or whatever, but at the same time, like by the end of the game, the only real player that we had that like would be you would think would be able to like control that game was like Yule, sort of Hernan. Hernan is pretty direct as well, but mainly like Yule and Bruno Wilson. And you just
I mean,
risk it's so risky having just Benji fullback. No, just leave the forwards on and take all the defenders off.
yeah, but to defend that though, the reality is that with the Open Cup, you don't have the depth on the bench that you regularly would against an MLS team. And so I
Right.
think the idea here was that we take our firepower, and if we need them, we bring them on, and hopefully that gets us through the game. And so I think by that point of where we're playing Benji as a fullback and then Scan as a fullback, I agree that having that many players rotate positions within a game and being put into situations that they probably aren't comfortable with. Like, sure, they can train, but they've never played, to my knowledge, anyways. That they've never played in those positions in actual
I
games,
don't think
and
I
so
don't think we gotta check the stats to know Benji's never played fullback before. But
yeah.
yeah,
And so I can also see it being confusing to the players where you have to constantly be shifting
yeah,
roles and like it's a high stakes game, the emotions, the extra time, like your legs are dead tired. Like Benji
yeah, and it
ran
was
so
intense.
much. And
Yeah.
so we just didn't have the option on the bench. And I understand why we gotten ourselves in that situation, but it's
I
just
just think
reflecting on it feels
you
bad.
I see what you're saying, and I agree. And like yeah, like if you wanted to sub in a midfielder, there's Yule, then after that, Thompson, I guess. But yeah, you're right. There's not too much depth. But I think that's when it's not just about the players you choose to bring on, but it's also about the players you choose to bring off. If they're physically able to, maybe you leave on Nico or even Morales, who hasn't been playing that many minutes. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be fit for that game. You leave in him on more. I think with forwards, it's kind of like a too many chefs in the kitchen situation where the like marginal benefit of adding more forwards just gets smaller and smaller with every forward. And there's also the cost of control in the midfield and who's gonna be building up who's gonna be feeding in the ball to Espinoza to cross it in to the box. Who's gonna be the ones
Yeah.
that are holding the ball to feed it in to Judd through the ball. And I also say like the Hernan goal, during that goal, Sacramento are sat defensively. I remember they had like a back line of four. I think there's three players in front of that. They're condensed. But still, you will pass it to Hernan to Preston. Preston feeds it back to him, opens up Sacramento's back line, and then it's a tidy finish. It kind of felt like it didn't come from anything. Sacramento was sat in their block, but because of the invention of Yule, Hernan, and Judd, they were able to just open it up regardless. And I feel like that's kind of I wish there was more of that and less of just sending a long ball to Benji or just feed Skahan and just have him run and just outpace everyone.
But then this goes back to the whole rotation discussion. I think most people agree evaluating how these players played, but it comes back to prioritization. There's a decision to be made between going for this deep Open Cup run or putting all the eggs into trying to make the MLS playoffs. And from our discussion last week, we both agreed that the easier route was the Open Cup because it's three must-win games, whereas the way the standings are shaped up now, so we kind of have to win out at home, which is 12, 13 must-win games, if you want to think about it that way.
Yeah,
And so
and
that
also
road is much longer.
a complete turnaround from what we've been doing up until this point as well. It's gonna be difficult to make up for those points.
Yeah, but the thing is, I feel like there's this, let's call it a rhetoric, that US Open Cup doesn't matter and that fans don't care about it. I understand where that's coming from. If you look at the attendance of the game against the Oakland Roots, it looked really bad. But I think it's unfair to say that based off of attendance that fans don't care. And
Yeah,
I think there's this impression that we are not allowed to rotate in MLS games. And that is why we saw this lineup. I think everyone agrees with from when the lineup was determined to the end of the game, we're all kind of on the same page of who played well, who should have played better. But then there's still the whole decision making process leading up to the lineup selection. And we hold MLS to this higher standard where the metric for success of the season is to make the playoffs. Our regular starters being starters in Open
right.
Cup, like that's not the priority. However,
Mhm.
this year is unique where there's only 8 teams from MLS. Two of them lost in the first round. And of the remaining teams, I think it was either two or three of them that we've already played and we've put in good performances against them, even on the road. Dallas and Kansas City, I'm pretty sure were those two. Yeah, you can say, yes, we lost. But okay, but in Dallas, we lost in the last minute. It was the first game this season. And in those two games, we didn't have none. So it's a completely different situation. If we run that back, I think we get points or a win in the Open Cup, whatever the situation is. And on top of this being the quickest path to an Open Cup final, it seems pretty clear that winning all of our home games or getting a bunch of draws on the road to make up for any missed points or getting wins on the road, like that just seems harder. Yes, it just seems harder. And I think where we're at as fans is that if we didn't make playoffs, but we won Open Cup or like made a deep run into Open Cup and took it seriously, I think we'd be pretty happy with that just because it signals clear intent from the team and the ability to win high stakes games. And I mean, well, okay, this isn't apples to apples. Seattle Sounders won the CONCACAF Champions League, and I'm pretty sure in that season they did not make playoffs. Do you think a single Seattle fan cares that they didn't make playoffs? No, like they won the Champions League, and I'm not saying that winning the Open Cup is at the same level as Champions League, but I think would we be just as ecstatic to win Open Cup but not make playoffs? I think we would. I get it.
And
Like
it's also,
we have to
you
rotate.
know,
We have to rotate.
on the topic of rotating in MLS, that's where I would say to Lucci, get creative with the way you play, with the lineup. I don't know if you remember last season when I think we had like a bunch of injuries or a red card or something, and we went to LA and we played like Drauco and someone
Midfield,
else in
in the
midfield.
midfield.
Yeah, like
Yep,
Drauco and Skahan or something
that's
in
like our best game of the
midfield.
season.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to play your system and like you want to play like you would typically with rotation, that's going to be difficult. But that's where I would say, yeah, you need to be creative. There's ways of playing that where maybe maybe you have to be a bit more conservative, not leave yourself as exposed. Like we saw in LAFC that game, there's ways of playing a quote unquote inferior squad and still getting results. You just have to be creative. It's about the way you set up the team. With lesser personnel or, with not as talented personnel, it's going to be more difficult, but there's ways of doing it. And in MLS, especially like against Orlando, this premise that you can't rotate in MLS is just not true. We've
Mm.
had to rotate plenty of times. Whether we've been forced into playing players that aren't our starters per se, but and still gotten results. It's possible.
We lost to Orlando anyways, you know? And
Yeah,
so
right. Even then, but of course, like
I
that's hindsight, right? Like I'm just trying to
yes,
say, like
but
going into the game.
going into that game, we know that we have another midweek game in Sacramento, and we know the
Mm,
circumstances that we're in MLS. And I'm not saying throw a game, but it's Orlando. If they beat us, the points stay in the East. You know, don't rotate against
That's a
Portland
good
because we
point.
don't want those 3 points in the
Yeah,
West. But if those points can go to the East, sure,
that's a
we
good
need
point.
those points. But it's not the end of the world to lose to an Eastern Conference
Yeah.
team. And sure, it's at home, and we're under this crunch to win games. But again, the road to Open Cup final is so much shorter than MLS playoffs. And
And so much more exciting. It just is,
yes,
especially for us. I think Orlando that would probably be the game to do it. And like I was saying, like you can, you know, alter your if you feel like playing the way you've been playing with different personnel would be too risky or wouldn't work. It's part of what a manager needs to be able to do is to, change things around and still find a way to get something out of the game. I do think that we would feel so much better if we made a deep run in the Open Cup. And I don't think that those low attendance numbers in Oakland demonstrates that the fans don't care about Open Cup. Because there's a lot of reasons why fans might go to any given MLS game. It's not just because it's
here's
MLS.
here's what I'll say about that really quick is that okay, Orlando has been in the league for how many years, right? We've played them at home, I'm pretty sure before. Do you remember the result of that game? I'm willing to bet
You
that
know,
no one remembers that. Do you
I
remember
do,
who
but
we do you
that's
actually
just
what is
me.
it?
We're Quakesaholic, bro. So I'm gonna know, but yeah, it was 3-0.
What was the result? Well, 3-0?
We won. Wando scored twice, I think.
Okay, well maybe I was disproved. Okay, but what about this? Do you remember who we played from the Eastern Conference at home last season and what the results were?
Only Philly
And
because of
sure,
the one shot that Trauco hit. That's it.
yes. Yeah.
That's
And
it.
so that kind of goes to my point that like if we don't remember, I doubt that the quote unquote normal Quakes fan is gonna remember those kinds of games.
Yeah.
But so many people remember us losing in Sacramento 2 years ago. So many of us
Yeah.
remember the loss in Monterey. And I
Mhm.
understand the argument of we have to play well at home to satisfy the fans that are coming.
Mm.
I don't think fans are satisfied going to home games just based off of winning. Because if that was the case, then I don't think we would get the turnout we've gotten this season. Like we've lost so many games that people are still coming, which is more indicative of something. And then when you look at how many people traveled to this away game, it was I'm gonna estimate probably at least 100, maybe like 150. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Between
Between
between the
we were
season ticket
sitting.
holders, Seismic Union, the Ultras,
Yeah.
that's on a Tuesday in Sacramento, which
90
if you live in
degrees as
San Jose,
well.
if you're in San Jose, that's at least 2 hours. And if you live south of San Jose, that's even more. And
Yeah.
as on a Tuesday with traffic, it getting to that game is very difficult. So if you have that many people traveling, that means that people care. And I mean, we'll go to away games because we're Quakesaholic, but for the person that isn't traveling for every game and they make this the occasion to travel, and that's what happens, like they're gonna remember that so much more than a loss at home.
Another thing too, I'm gonna be honest. I think Lucci, he should care about the fans, but I don't think you should be making a fan or sorry, you should be making a lineup based on the turnout of a game or that just should not go into the thinking at all. It's about
Yeah,
competing. It's about wanting to win. That's the mentality you should have. The reason why we want to care about Open Cup, we care about Open Cup is because we think it's our best chance of winning. And I
yeah,
feel like that's just true because it's true. It's our best chance of winning, especially given the circumstances that we're in at the moment with MLS and how this season specifically has gone so far and how this Open Cup was different than others. Like this was our biggest chance of getting trophy this season. And I would expect of a manager with ambition that they would also see it the same way. And that's like another thing too. It's like just from a competitive aspect, from like just the dressing room, that should be the priority. And as a consequence of that, the fans are gonna be happy, and the fans are gonna feel good.
yeah.
Um,
And I do think that there are players that really cared about this competition. I mean, we
oh, for
saw
sure.
Espinosa, what was it, like a hammer fist to the ground after the game and just sitting in the midfield alone,
Yeah,
just
no, he
reflecting
was.
on what just happened.
Yeah,
Like, these players want to compete, they want to win, and it's just unfortunate that they weren't given that opportunity. And I
satisfaction.
don't know,
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like we've lamented enough about this, and it's kind of like it is what it is. And if you don't have any more thoughts, I think we can talk about there was a gambit, and from what we've seen, it seems like Lucci or the club have said no, MLS playoffs is the target. And personally, from the disappointment of how we went out against Sacramento, that can only be forgiven if we make the playoffs.
I agree. That's the goal, and that's the standard that they have to meet for themselves. It's kind of the hole that they've been put in.
How are you feeling about the consequences if we don't make the playoff?
I think I would agree with you that if we don't make the playoffs and after this, what's happened with the Open Cup, you're talking about forgetting losing a game. I think that you forget the whole season basically. Again, this would be my reflection after the fact. Unfortunate because of how pleased, especially after the back of last season. But I think that there's what is there to remember? So
I mean, I'll remember all the away games.
yeah, can't forget. It's more like not about do you want to remember 'em, it's like can't forget them. Maybe that.
Yeah, no matter what happens, we're gonna be there unless I get
Well,
horribly sick again.
well,
Yeah,
anyway, I think that we got most of our thoughts on the
yeah,
way.
and
Um,
we've been mega downers, but we do still strongly believe in this team, and we're gonna go to every game thinking that we're gonna win, home or away, and we're gonna go into every situation thinking that we're gonna make the playoffs.
remember how tight it was last year? And I also
Yeah.
remember that last year was an exceptionally high points threshold for playoffs. It was a lot higher than it usually is
Hmm.
because it was so tight. But the bottom of the West to the play-in spot is 2 wins. It's doable. It is doable. It's gonna be difficult because we're gonna have to win maybe games we don't expect to win, whether that be, all the home games or, some away games here and there, but it's still doable. The season is not a write off, of course, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah. I mean, we have Hernan and we have Espinosa. Like,
True.
we're in good
Yeah,
hands,
we
I
are in
believe.
good.
And yeah, we're only 6 points away. It's very doable, but like we got to win our home games. And yeah, I think one of the things that we wanted to do deeper conversation on Hernan's arrival and what he provides to the team and how he's performed and what that is going to give us for these next games. Probably after the Austin game, we'll do a video reflecting on the Austin game, followed by a deep dive into Hernan. And
Hmm.
we'll have more thoughts on why we can make playoffs then to kind of counterbalance this very
Yeah,
gloomy discussion.
hopefully off the back of a result, and I think we will. I think we will.
I think we
I think
definitely
we
could as well.
no, I think we will.
That's the Quakesaholics in us that we can beat anyone.
So, yeah, so
They're
and
only third, right?
they don't know what to do with that. They don't know what to do with that. Yeah, lots to think about. So lots to still look forward to. So thank you guys for listening to this episode of Quakesaholic. Any last thoughts, Kevin?
Let's go Quakes. Let's get these 3 points and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.